The Netherlands is famous for its incredibly efficient road systems, iconic cycling culture, and seamlessly integrated tram networks. While they have the capacity to move millions of people every day, they also do it with a design philosophy to make it all feel effortless. This week, I'll be expanding the foundations of a world-class transport network here in the future business district of a fictional Dutch city, Noevorden. But I can't just lay down lanes and hope everything connects itself. Every lane, cycle path, tram line and metro line needs to be carefully planned, as I want this to be integrated seamlessly into the city, and that means balancing the game mechanics with traditional Dutch planning principles. Last week, we also saw a big investment in infrastructure. As well as moving the train depot to a more central location, I recreated a real-life stretch of Dutch highway found just outside The Hague. This highway development opens up a whole new area of the map, which is very much a requirement when I want to start building some low-density neighbourhoods. So not only do we have a big stack interchange, but we also have 3 more service interchanges ready to shift traffic off the highway network and on and into our future districts. The train line was integrated into the network, and there's a couple of tram lines ready to go, as well as the initial building of what will be an expansive bike network. So in this video, it's very much going to be about laying down the groundwork for the next episode. I don't want to get in a situation where I have to redo the networks, whether that's road, tram, bikes or metro. This is going to be a really highly detailed area, very dense too, and the thought of having to rip that out for a redo later on really doesn't bear thinking about. Traffic is absolutely going to be an issue in this city, as I've said from episode 1, so it's going to be imperative that there's going to be plenty of capacity before we start getting the buildings in place. In short, I've kind of got to get this right first time. So let's take a look at the real life inspiration for this one. So here we're going to focus on Amstel station in the east of Amsterdam. The main focal point here, of course, is the roundabout. You'll notice that we've got the trams running through there, but also an unusual left turn cutting through the roundabout as well for road traffic. Integrated trams you'll notice on the train station, plenty of dedicated bike networks as well. You will see that there's going to be higher density around here, and that's the same with Amsterdam South, where you find the main business district of the city. But later on I'm going to be taking elements of these areas, as well as Rotterdam and The Hague, and we're going to combine probably a bigger district than what you would find in those cities combined. Now this little underpass, I wasn't really happy with it at the time. I think it was more of a placeholder and more of a reminder that I really need to have a network running under here. What I really wanted to do was to increase the amount of traffic, public transport options that we have here, and really what I want to do is make sure that we've got trams coming through here, and I want to give the bikes some options as well. I'm going to make a tunnel, and we'll make it one of the larger roads. I'm going to convert the innermost lanes to tram, and of course I want to have the bike lanes either side of it as well. Really just taking this under and making sure that it's just at the minimum height. So I think it's minus 13 if I remember correctly is what you need for a tunnel, and that will just about do. A little bit messy, but I think it's a good starting point, and at least it's in the right location. Let's just move it. We'll use the segment, or the nodes rather, and we'll just drag it out and make sure that it's not cutting underneath. It looks, as I said, it looks a little untidy. At least if we can do this, it should look a little bit more natural. There's quite a drop in elevation here, but I think it's going to be necessary. I don't want huge roads taking up a massive amount of real estate, quite honestly, so I'm going to go a little bit steeper than I would usually allow. With the tunnel placement pretty much done and dusted, I want to reserve a bit of space now for our integrated trams. Now I'm going to bump the actual scale of this up. I want to have it a bit bigger than the one that we see in the real life inspiration. I really want to have this as the main tram terminus, although we do have trams running on the other sides, and we've got a couple of stops there. I think really taking the time to kind of reserve a fairly big chunky space here would probably make sense, and I think it does make sense to try and pick one single point where the trams can terminate as well, and obviously the Sims can swap from one tram to the other, or even a different mode of transport, and we're going to be adding a few more here as the episode goes on. So this is now going to be the third metro station in the city. We've all got it on one line, pretty straightforward. In terms of the orientation, I think it makes sense to have it up against the road rather than a 90-degree angle. And this should fit in quite nicely with the general direction of the line as well. Now, it's obviously worth taking just a minute to make sure that everything does actually work as well, so let's get the line tool out and we'll get these things hooked up. So we can take the existing line, we just simply drag it to the new station, pick a stop, and of course we can redo this later if we extend the line. Now this didn't quite work, so we just need to drag that in and make sure that it does recognise it as a stop. That looks okay. Yeah, I think we're good. Perfect, lovely. And we've got people coming in and using the station already. Fantastic. Now, just to make things a little bit easier for our Sims, I'm just going to drag this across a little bit and they should be able to just cross the street direct. Now, I had to redo the lines just ever so slightly and tidy things up, but yeah. Over on the other side of the development, we are also going to create a little bit of an arterial connection over here. Now, I am a little bit concerned because we essentially have this main road, we've got the other main road, which was the tunnel that we've just saw, and then we've got the highway tunnel, which is already in place. So really it's going to be quite a big area, and there's only going to be 3 roads coming in and out. So again, got to make sure that the public transport options are extensive and give our Sims plenty of opportunity and plenty of options to use public transport and cycling to get around the city, and more than anything else, I just want to keep them off the roads. Now, because the existing networks are already pretty much sunken, we're going to be able to create a bridge at a much lower level than you would normally find, which is going to create a nice little effect, especially when we get this place built up a bit later on. This will also be used for trams, and we are going to have some elevated bike lanes along here as well. This is the first episode of Noevorden that we actually have bikes, so we are absolutely going to lean into that. We got plenty of work to do to kind of really retrofit the rest of the city, and I want to see what's going to be available in Road Builder potentially later down the line before I really get stuck into making too many changes to the existing development of the city. So I've taken a little bit of time there. This is pretty much going to be the final configuration for the trams. I think we've got plenty of space here for expansion, 8 lines potentially that we could run from here without any issues. So I'm going to just pause the video here and just kind of run through what I am thinking at this point. So now and again, after a while, my brain can turn to mush and I can kind of lose track of the big picture. So what I've done here is I've just used some dirt lanes, dirt roads, and essentially just mapped out exactly how I want the networks to look. I know already what the roundabout is going to look like, but I don't have a clear idea in my mind just exactly how the rest of the networks are going to lead into it, and how I'm going to deal with the trams. So one thing I might suggest that you do if you do get stuck and you just end up staring at the screen and getting nothing built, just draw out some frames and just plan it out in front of you. And I've talked about that earlier on, visualization, just any tool that can help you just try and get it in your head. Once you've got it in your head, it's significantly easier to crack on and build out. So if you get stuck in a planning stage, try this. I promise you, it definitely does help. So now that I've got the visual aids, let's get the rest of the networks in and get the roundabout built. And what I'll do is I'll pop on some music and then I'll catch up with you in just a minute and we're going to run through some of my thinking for some of the bike lanes. Cool, that pretty much covers it for the roundabout. I'm going to make a few more adjustments. Obviously we're going to kind of detail this up a little bit later on as well, but that's pretty much the gist of it. I've almost kept most of the original features from the real life example, but I am going to change some of the lane configurations just to kind of suit my needs. I think we can get some smoother curves, so I might redo a couple of sections here and there, but we'll see how we get on. And now I reckon we can crack on and we can start on the bike network. So I want to have a nice combination that you would find, in a Dutch city. I want to have dedicated lanes. I'm going to have some of the lanes on the actual road itself, and I'm going to have some combined lanes, both with pedestrian traffic and bike traffic as well. Now, one of the unfortunate things is that you can't run the bike network directly over the trams. I'm pretty sure I did see an invisible bike network, so that could potentially work. I know that the pedestrian path does work over these tram lines, but what I decided to do was to actually extend it out, and I'm going to use a bigger network, and we're going to have a little bit of an underpass here as well, which is going to look really nice. And what I'll do at the end of the video, I'll give you a little sneak peek on how that's looking in the next episode. Next episode's recorded already. I can promise you it looks really good, tons of detailing on it, and I think it will be a popular one. So yeah, I'll give you a little sneak peek at the end of the video if you stick around. I want to take these opportunities, and we're going to create crossings over this main road. I don't think it's going to be super busy, you know, obviously on that particular exit, really you've only got local traffic, so I think having places to cross there for pedestrians and for the bikes kind of makes sense, and I don't think it's going to cause too many issues. Fingers crossed. So I need to do a little bit of an adjustment here and take out some of the bike parking that we had in place already. Not really a big deal, we don't really have any detailing to worry about or having to redo, so now's the time. If we do need to delete stuff and redo it, now is absolutely the time to do so. So let's just get this little bit of bike infrastructure wrapped up now. The next feature that we're going to add here in this episode is an elevated section for our bikes. I don't really want to have too many of these, to be honest, and really anytime I've been in the Netherlands I've not really seen them. Anytime I've looked on Google Maps, the only time I really see these kind of overpasses tends to be over highways, either goes over or under. So I think it's going to make sense to have it on our highway that is going to lead out of the city, into the tunnel and off to wherever it's going to connect to. But it does give me a nice excuse to get some of these elevated networks in because they look pretty cool. Swinging back over to our station, I noticed that our cyclists are having to take really quite a long route by taking that arterial right the way around, so I'm going to give them a bit of a shortcut. Next episode I'm going to create a second one because it does get quite busy in fact, but I think for this one at least we're going to create just a single one, and then I'll have a pretty good idea just exactly how this particular network is going to come in and how I'm going to build around it. Time now to tidy things up a little bit and kind of add a little spot of detailing, and by detailing what I mean is just making the bike lanes red, right? Obviously I'm not going to be keeping these green, that's completely out of the question. While I'm at it, I may as well get the tram sections done as well. It's just a case of using the same net lane that we've used elsewhere in the city. Now obviously we're going to be doing the bike lanes red, but there is something I want to show you just in a minute or two that you might be surprised about. I certainly was, and I think if you're going to be building a sort of Dutch city yourself, you're definitely going to want to see it. So using the same method that we did on the last episode, we're just going to use move it, manipulation mode, and we're going to use a little shortcut there and just raise everything, and we got a nice elevated section with our red pathing. Where we've got the ground level sections, I'm just going to use a Gendo's French pack, and we are going to use that red path on there as well. That looks pretty good, and I'm going to really just do it everywhere where you see the dedicated bike lanes. I'm going to do exactly the same. So it's kind of rinse and repeat. I'm going to cut most of this out because it does get pretty repetitious. One thing to note is that if you are doing your elevated sections and it's going to be on a slope, it still works just exactly the same. You just individually just change the node heights, and you can get that without too much effort. Now it kind of bleeds over the edge when you look at it really closely, but you know, at the end of the day, not really too big a deal. For the bike lanes that are part of the main road, again I'm just going to use the surfaces here. I've got a little trick to show you guys in just a minute regarding the tunnel sections, which you'll definitely want to see, but otherwise it's just rinse and repeat, as I said, same techniques. So one little tip for you guys as well is if you do have short tunnel sections, once you get this in place, what you can do is you can actually drag that final node directly under the tunnel. So you don't necessarily have to have that little green section that you're going to see me have at the end. You can run it straight the way through and it definitely will work. Now have a look at this one. I'm using the net lane, and when you finally adjust the height on it, you can basically have it underneath the pavement that is directly beside the lane itself, so it doesn't actually bleed over to the pavement, and you do get that fine detail, and you're going to be able to get a really good result when you've got your tunnel sections. So that was a new one for me. Really happy to see that actually works, and it's a potential headache that I had. I didn't know how I was going to make it look good, but there we go, happy days, it works straight out of the box. Car parking is definitely going to be an issue here. I don't want on-street parking, so I've just created a really basic underground parking structure. I think I'm going to have to add a few more of them in the city elsewhere. Parking is a big issue, and I believe cars just go around in circles if they don't get a parking space. I don't know if that's still a thing or not, but whether it is or whether it's not, it's going to be my job to basically give some more additional parking options elsewhere in the city, and that's basically how I'm going to do it. Obviously the Dutch ones are pretty cool, they're the assets themselves, but I don't want a million of them. They take up quite a bit of space as well, and I think obviously Dutch city, you would absolutely expect underground parking, and we're going to see a bit more of that a little bit later on in the city once we revisit the main build area. So it's time for a little bit of a tidy up, a little bit of detailing here on this section, and then there's a few buildings that I want to talk about. So let's crack on with that. Now that we've got a few more net lanes and a few more surfaces in here, I think you can get a real feel for how this place is going to look. This is actually the section that I'm going to show you the sneak peek at the end, so you can see how things are going to look next episode. But we've got a bit of work to do before we get to that point. One thing I wanted to do was to create a couple of little pockets in this particular part of the city that still will have some older buildings. We're very much going to be having much more modern buildings over this side of the railway, but I wanted some remnants that perhaps, survived redevelopment or wartime or whatever. You can make up your own story with that. I'm not too interested in the story stuff, but yeah, I definitely wanted to kind of get the feel that perhaps we've got a couple of remnants of what was here previously. Don't panic, but I am going to delete this railway station. Had a few issues with some of the bike parking pathfinding. I'm guessing I kind of messed things up with Mover or Anarchy or something, I'm assuming, so I wanted to just try and see if it would actually work if I could just delete it and replace it, and happily it worked perfectly fine. No more notifications there on the bike parking, which is pretty nice to see, so that is one problem resolved. I did try and run it on just to check to see if they would actually use it, but I ended up putting additional parking along the front, which looks kind of nice, but the Sims will absolutely prefer to use that rather than the parking that's built into the asset, so gonna have to sit on that one for a little while. I can come back and check it later. So some feedback I got from the last video was that these trains are too bright. I am going to tone them down a little bit for you guys, but they're probably still a little bit too bright. There's probably not too much I can do about that, to be honest with you, but I think toning it down is the right idea, and hopefully that'll look a little bit better. The ones that are still kind of running through the station, I'm just going to grab them and give them a little bit of a redo at the same time as well. Now, although this video is not really about detailing or really putting too many buildings down, there's literally going to be about 3 buildings placed in this entire video. I just needed a little bit of a break from the infrastructure stuff, and I thought I'll get involved and try and make a couple of little sections where we can try and make it look a little bit more natural. So I'm going to be using Real Vision's decals here. They are absolute classics for City Skylines 2 now at this stage, but a couple of decals, a little bit of fencing, a few trees, and we got a nice little area detailed up and looking pretty decent. Here what I'm going to do is use one of StarQ's ploppable assets. I want this building set away from the road, and really I want it like a little kind of office development here, and that structure there in the middle of the square is essentially going to be like a lift, to the underground parking. Obviously it's not functional, but that's kind of what I've got in my head anyway. I may as well just detail it out. It's only a small section. Going to use Silly's grass decals here, which are always pretty good when we're surfacing things up. I wanted to add a little splash of colour, man. plan with some cherry blossoms, and why not. Some of the grates that we're going to have from Crypto Gamer, I believe, and we're going to use the birches we normally do here on these particular decals. Little collection of the usual props. We'll get some bins, a couple of little benches, a little sign or two where it makes sense. Want to make sure that we have some parking signs here as well. And then at the little entrance, I'm going to add a couple of parking meters and a couple of parking signs, just to make it clear for people that's what that is for. Final touches here with a little bit of recolour, and that is basically it for the buildings in this particular episode. It's going to give us a nice little section that I wanted out and done and out of the way. I think here I'm just going to put trees in, but again, it's prime development area, so I think we definitely have scope to add a few bits and pieces here if we want to later down the line. So again, Real Vision decals, just going to really flood the area. I'm going to use a little bit of a combination to get some nice varied textures on the ground, which is pretty nice. And it does make such a big difference having that and just breaking up the vanilla grass, doesn't it? Now, I believe I talked about in previous episodes the sort of surrounding islands, these little islands that I'm kind of working on here, and sort of really just decipher what the plan's going to be on this one. So here you're going to see me removing the key walls. I thought long and hard about it, and I think realistically keeping the key walls probably was not going to be a particularly great option. I don't see any examples necessarily in real life, but obviously it's a really large, fort city. Is probably larger than any examples in the Netherlands itself. So it comes with its own sort of unique challenges, I guess, and one of them was really just exactly how to deal with this area. In the end, I thought I'm just going to make it really natural. That said, I can use it as sort of transport corridors. We can use it for whatever development we want, but I'm not going to have really densely populated stuff in here. I don't think it's going to make sense. So I'm essentially just going to bring it back to nature, so to speak, and get it all covered with trees and bushes. And I think it's definitely the right decision. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments, and if you have any ideas. I know I've asked for ideas for these little sections before, but yeah, if you have any ideas, just chuck them in the comments, because I would be interested to hear what you guys have got in mind. One thing I will do just at this point is just to take the opportunity to hook up at least one of the networks here. I think we're going to bring one of the tram networks over, and again, it's going to give us a little bit of leeway for expansion later on in the series. That if we have at least this in place, then it's one less thing for me to think about as I build out the rest of the series. So I'm going to use the drawbridge for the trams. I think again it makes sense. We do have an active seaway here, so we're going to need something that's movable. Either that or we have to go really, really high up, and that's just not going to fit. We actually have quite a big island here between the surrounding island and the other development zone over where the highway is. So that's going to be interesting. I think I'll definitely be building on that later on. And of course, we now have tram line running through it already, so it's going to be an easy decision just to stick a tram stop in there, as well as perhaps maybe adding a few other options as well. Now this thing's looking a little bit ugly at the moment. I think I'll spend a wee bit of time on this later on, just kind of sort out the aesthetics of it, and hopefully we can make something a little bit more interesting as we build out the rest of the series. So the next episode really is going to concentrate development around the train station, and then I think we're going to have a number of episodes. Realistically, it's quite a big area here, and I really want to have it nice and really street level detailed as well, and it's going to look really, really good once we have it all built out, I can promise you that. Okay, so that's just the last few finishing touches over on this particular section of the build. I think that's looking a little bit tidier, a little bit smoother, and yeah, I think that's looking like a decent base for another episode. So let's just get the final bit of detailing wrapped up now. Okay, so final peek at this infrastructure then, and let's see how things are looking. I think I'm pretty happy with the detail on the roundabout. Nice to see a little bit of traffic on here, and of course once we start adding buildings and any sort of great numbers, we're going to see a lot more of that as well. It'll be interesting to see just exactly how well it's going to cope with any traffic that we've got coming up. And coming up, this is the sneak peek of the next episode. You guys can get a pretty good idea of how the detailing is done here. As you can see, there is a lot of it in the next episode, so make sure that you're subscribed if you want to see how it turns out. But yeah, thanks for watching guys, that's it for this one, take care.